What sparked the heated debates around the inclusion of socialist and secular in the preamble through the 42nd Amendment? Let's explore the legal, political, and historical significance of this landmark change to India's constitution and its impact on the nation's identity. The preamble to the Indian Constitution serves as the guiding light of the document, encapsulating the aspirations and fundamental values on which the nation is built. It defines the nature of the Indian state and the goals that it seeks to achieve. In 1976, the 42nd Amendment significantly altered the language of the preamble by adding the words socialist and secular. While these terms may appear straightforward, their inclusion sparked intense legal and historical debates that continue to shape the discourse on the Constitution today. Aims to examine the legal, political, and ideological implications of the inclusion of these terms, analyzing both the debates surrounding them and their lasting impact on Indian democracy. What is the historical context of the 42nd Amendment? The 42nd Amendment, often referred to as the Constitution 42nd Amendment Act 1976, was passed during the period of emergency 1975 to 1977 under the leadership of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. The amendment was sweeping, introducing numerous changes to the Constitution, including alterations to the preamble. The inclusion of the words socialist and secular occurred in a politically charged environment where the ruling government sought to consolidate its position. These changes were seen by some as an attempt to solidify the ideological direction of the state, aligning it with the government's political objectives. The decision to amend the preamble during the emergency raised suspicions of political maneuvering. Critics argued that it was a means to project the government's ideological stance with limited public debate. However, over time, these amendments became crucial in defining India's constitutional identity, prompting extensive discussion and legal interpretation. What is the debate over the inclusion of socialist in the preamble? The inclusion of the term socialist in the preamble has provoked considerable debate, primarily concerning its meaning and implications. Socialism as an ideology generally advocates for the redistribution of wealth, the abolition of class distinctions, and a collective or state control over the economy. However, India's approach to socialism has never strictly adhered to any one particular model. It is instead a blend of various ideologies, including the Gandhian concept of rural self-sufficiency and Nehruvian state-led industrialization. The question then arises, what does socialism mean in the Indian context? 1. Conceptual clarity. The term socialist in the Indian preamble does not prescribe a single rigid economic model. It can be understood as a commitment to social justice, equity, and welfare for all. The inclusion of socialism highlights the state's responsibility to ensure that economic resources are distributed fairly and that social inequalities are addressed. This broad interpretation has been reinforced by judicial pronouncements, which have underscored that socialism in India is a means to create a just society rather than a rigid economic doctrine. In this regard, the Supreme Court in Minerva Mills Litigation v. Union of India 1980 emphasized that socialism should be seen as part of a larger framework of social justice and welfare. 2. Political implications. The timing of the amendment during the emergency raises questions about the political motivations behind the inclusion of the term. Critics argue that the term was introduced to align the Constitution with the political agenda of the ruling Congress Party, which focused on centralization and state intervention in the economy. By invoking socialism, the government sought to bolster its policies of nationalization and central planning, while also distancing itself from the liberalization agenda that was beginning to gain traction in the West. 3. Economic realities. While the term socialist was included in the Constitution, India's subsequent shift towards a market-driven economy, particularly after the 1991 economic reforms, has led to some contradictions. As India embraced liberalization, privatization, and globalization, the applicability of socialism in its original form became contentious. The evolution of the economy towards a mixed economy has led to debates about whether the state's commitment to socialism is still relevant in its traditional sense or whether it needs to evolve to reflect new economic realities. What is the debate over the inclusion of secular in the preamble? The second term introduced in the preamble through the 42nd Amendment is secular. Before the amendment, while India was constitutionally secular, prohibiting the establishment of a state religion and guaranteeing the freedom to practice any religion, the term itself was not explicitly included in the preamble. The amendment sought to clarify India's commitment to secularism and firmly enshrine it as a constitutional principle. 1. Secularism in the Indian context. Secularism in the Western sense often refers to the strict separation of religion from the state. However, in India, secularism is understood differently. The Indian model promotes religious tolerance, pluralism, and equal respect for all religions. The term in the preamble thus signifies the state's role in maintaining religious neutrality while promoting an environment where diverse religious communities can coexist peacefully. The Indian approach to secularism emphasizes that the state will not interfere in religious practices but will act to prevent discrimination based on religion. Second, judicial interpretation. The Supreme Court has played a pivotal role in interpreting the term secular through various rulings. In the S.R. Bommai Vaidaf Union of India 1994 case, the court clarified that secularism does not mean the absence of religion but rather that the state must treat all religions equally. This interpretation also reinforced the idea that secularism in India is not about state atheism but religious accommodation. The court's interpretation emphasizes the pluralistic nature of Indian society wherein the state supports religious harmony and inclusivity. 3. Political and social realities. The inclusion of secular in the preamble was also a response to the growing religious polarization in Indian politics. In the 1970s, particularly during the emergency, the country faced rising religious and political tensions. Some sections of society began advocating for a Hindu state, while others feared the marginalization of religious minorities. The insertion of secular sought to reaffirm India's commitment to religious pluralism and tolerance, especially in the face of such challenges. However, the term has continued to be a subject of political debate, with some political forces questioning the role of religion in the public sphere. What are the legal and political implications of the amendments to the preamble? The legal implications of the amendments to the preamble lie in their potential to influence the interpretation of the Constitution. The inclusion of socialist and secular has provided a clearer constitutional foundation for policies aimed at promoting social justice, economic equality, and religious tolerance. However, these terms have also led to contradictions between constitutional ideals and actual state practices, especially with regard to economic policies and the role of religion in politics. Politically, the 42nd Amendment is often seen as an attempt to align the Constitution with the goals of the ruling government at the time. Critics argue that it reflected an effort to consolidate power and reshape India's ideological framework in favor of the ruling party's agenda. However, in the long term, the terms have become integral to India's constitutional identity, influencing public policy and judicial rulings on issues of social justice and religious freedom. In conclusion, the inclusion of socialist and secular in the preamble through the 42nd Amendment was a significant moment in India's constitutional history. These terms reflected the state's commitment to social justice, economic welfare, and religious harmony. However, they also sparked debates about the meaning and application of these ideals in the evolving political and economic landscape of India. While the judicial interpretations of these terms have clarified their significance, the debates surrounding their inclusion highlight the dynamic and evolving nature of India's democracy. Ultimately, the 42nd Amendment reinforced the vision of an inclusive, just, and tolerant India. It laid the foundation for the development of India's unique model of socialism and secularism, one that continues to evolve in response to the challenges and realities of the 21st century. Do you believe the inclusion of the terms socialist and secular in the preamble during the 42nd Amendment has strengthened or diluted the essence of India's democratic values? Share your thoughts on how these terms should be interpreted in the context of India's evolving political and economic landscape.